The city of Crestwood hummed with a nervous kind of energy that Saturday morning. It was the kind of energy you could feel in the air, a low buzz that made people check their phones a little more often. The reason for it was sitting in the mayor's office on the top floor of City Hall, staring at a stack of reports that the new mayor had been in office for less than a month. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man who had spent his career as a community lawyer before running for office. His win had been a surprise to the old political machine, a signal that people wanted something different. Right now, what they wanted was for him to fix the police department. There were stories about heavy-handed tactics, about distrust in certain neighborhoods. His first big project was a top-to-bottom review of how the police worked, and today he was preparing to meet the police union president. It was going to be a tough conversation. Across town, his wife was thinking about a different kind of conversation. She was a scientist, a person who studied plants and believed in listening closely. She had never wanted to be in the spotlight, but marrying a mayor changed that. She felt a distance growing, a gap between the polished statements made at press conferences and the real worries of the people in the city. She wanted to hear them for herself, without the title of mayor's wife getting in the way. That's why she decided to go to the protest. It wasn't about the police. It was about a plan to put a new shipping warehouse in the middle of a neighborhood park. The people there were fighting for their green space, for their kids to have somewhere to play. It seemed like a good place to just listen. She dressed carefully in old jeans, a plain gray sweatshirt with the hood down, and a lightweight scarf around her neck. She tied her hair back simply. In her large shoulder bag, she had a notebook, a water bottle, and her phone. She looked like anyone else, a young professional out for the day. She drove her own small, common car downtown and parked a few blocks away, her heart beating a little faster with a mix of nerves and purpose. The protest was already gathering when she arrived. It was peaceful, almost like a street fair. There were kids with handmade signs, older folks in folding chairs, students chanting rhymes. She found a spot near the edge of the crowd, close to the sidewalk, and just watched. She took out her notebook and pretended to sketch, her ears tuned to the conversations around her. People were angry, but they were hopeful too. They believed if they were loud enough, someone would hear them. She wrote down a few phrases she heard, her scientist's mind cataloging the data of their frustration. A few blocks over, Officer Garrick Finch was tightening the Velcro straps on his bulletproof vest. His shift had just started, and the protest was the main topic at roll call. The sergeant told them to keep it peaceful, to facilitate, not escalate. Finch nodded along, but inside he felt a simmering irritation. Finch came from a family where the men wore uniforms. His father was a retired sergeant. His older brother worked in the next county over. He believed in the job and the idea of holding the line against chaos. The last few weeks had been grating on him. The new mayor's talk of review and reform sounded in the locker room chatter like an accusation. It felt like the people they were sworn to protect were now being listened to more than the police themselves. He saw the protest not as a civic duty, but as a potential problem. A bunch of complainers who didn't understand how hard the job was. His partner for the day was an older officer, a man with tired eyes who had seen it all. "Just stay cool, kid," his partner said, clipping his radio to his belt. "It's a bunch of folks with signs. Smile, stand there, go home safe." The protest continued peacefully for over an hour. The mayor's wife moved through the crowd slowly, listening to different groups. She bought a bottle of water from a street vendor and thanked him. She was starting to feel invisible, and it was a relief. Then a decision was made. A small group of younger protesters, frustrated that the media cameras weren't paying attention, decided to move from the public square to the actual driveway of the corporate headquarters. They sat down, linking arms, blocking the empty gate. It was a classic move, designed to get a reaction. The police line shifted. The order came over the radio. Clear the driveway. Maintain order. Finch's unit moved forward. The mood changed in an instant. The chanting grew louder, angrier. The older officer stayed near the perimeter, talking calmly to people. But Finch pushed right up to the line of sitting protesters. "You need to disperse now," Finch announced, his voice loud but flat through his bullhorn. "This is an unlawful obstruction." The seated group started chanting louder, refusing to move. Finch's face grew hot under his helmet. He saw defiance. He saw disrespect. He stopped seeing people and saw a problem to be solved. His partner called out to him, "Finch, easy. Let the lieutenants handle this." But Finch was already in motion. He stepped forward, using his baton not to strike, but to push, to create space between the protesters. It was a hard, aggressive shove. People stumbled, shouting in surprise and pain. The crowd around them surged, a wave of alarm. The mayor's wife was just a few feet away, watching this pocket of chaos erupt. Her scientist's mind switched off. A human instinct switched on. She saw young faces, scared. She saw an officer who looked like he was losing control. Without thinking about who she was, she moved from the sidewalk toward the scrum. She wasn't running. She was walking with purpose, her hands up, palms out, trying to be seen as non-threatening. She positioned herself between Finch and a young woman who was crying. She made eye contact with Finch. His eyes were wide, darting, full of a kind of panic she recognized as adrenaline and fear. "Officer," she said, her voice clear and steady, trying to cut through the noise. "Officer, please. Just stop for a second. There's no need for this." Finch saw a new person entering his space. He didn't see a concerned woman. He saw another body blocking him, another voice telling him what to do. He saw the scarf, the bag, someone getting too close. In his heightened state, her movement towards him felt like a threat. The training he clung to in that moment wasn't about de-escalation. It was about maintaining control. "Get back," he barked, raising his baton horizontally to push her away. She took a small step closer, her hands still up. "Listen to me. You're making it worse." The baton came up higher. It was no longer a tool to push sideways. In a short, brutal, upward arc, meant to clear a space directly in front of him, the hard epoxy end of the baton connected with the side of her face. There was a sound. Not a loud crack, but a dense, terrible thud, like a heavy book dropped on wet wood. The force snapped her head to the side. The world didn't go dark. It exploded into a galaxy of white, blinding pain. Her legs folded beneath her as if the bones had vanished. She crumpled to the rough asphalt, one hand flying to her face, the other scrambling to stop her fall. A scream was trapped somewhere between her lungs and her shattered cheekbone, coming out as a choked gasp. Silence fell in a small, immediate circle around her. The protesters nearby froze. The young woman she had been trying to help shrieked. Finch stood over her, his baton still raised, his breath heaving. He looked at the woman on the ground, clutching her face, a thin trickle of blood already visible between her fingers. He saw the plain clothes, the simple scarf now stained with the gravel of the street. He saw a problem he had just made infinitely worse. His partner was there in an instant, pulling him back by the strap of his vest, his voice a harsh, low curse in Finch's ear. "What did you do? What the hell did you just do?" On the cold ground, the mayor's wife tried to breathe. The pain was a sun burning in her skull. One thought, clear and desperate, cut through the shock. Don't say who you are. Just get home. She fumbled in her bag, her vision swimming, her fingers finding her phone. With hands that wouldn't stop shaking, she pressed a single speed dial number. The one that went to her husband's private driver. An old friend who could be trusted. She whispered into the phone, her words slurred by swelling flesh. Come get me. The protest. Don't tell him yet. Just come. And then she waited, her face pressed against the cool, dirty asphalt, while the world she had tried to quietly understand erupted into sirens and shouts all around her. The next few minutes were a blur of noise and pain. Someone from the protest, a woman with a medic's red cross on her sleeve, was suddenly kneeling beside the mayor's wife, her face a mask of professional calm. I'm with Street Medical, the woman said gently, her hands already moving to check for serious injury. Can you tell me your name? Through the roaring in her head and the sickening throb in her face, one clear thought held: anonymity. Saying her name would turn this personal, private agony into a public circus. It would become about him, about his job, not about what had just happened to her. To them, no name, she managed to whisper, the words thick and strange in her mouth. She could taste blood, coppery and warm. Just help me sit up. The medic hesitated, clearly trained to get information. But she saw the fierce, pleading look in the woman's eyes and nodded. She helped her shift to a sitting position, her back against a newspaper box. The world tilted and swam. A cold pack was pressed gently to the side of her face. The initial sharp shock of it was a relief against the spreading, deep burn dot around them. Chaos was hardening into procedure. More police units arrived, their lights painting the buildings in frantic flashes of blue and red. The protest was no longer a protest. It was a crime scene. The officers who had been trying to manage the crowd now formed a tight, defensive ring around their own. Finch was led away from the immediate area by his partner and a sergeant. His face was pale, his earlier fury completely gone, replaced by a hollow, staring look. His partner steered him towards a parked squad car, away from the staring eyes of the crowd and the other officers. What were you thinking? The older officer hissed, his voice low and furious. Did you even hear her? She was talking to you. Finch didn't answer. He just kept seeing it, the upward swing of his own arm, the way her head had snapped to the side. He could still feel the impact travel up the baton, a jarring vibration in his hands. He shook his head, a tiny, desperate movement. She came at me. It was a reaction. Back at the newspaper box, the mayor's wife waved off an ambulance that had pulled up, its doors open. My ride is coming, she told the medic, her voice a bit stronger now, though every word hurt her jaw. Thank you, really. She saw a young man with a camera phone pointed directly at her. She turned her head away, letting her hair fall to shield her injured cheek. She focused on the gritty feel of the pavement beneath her hands, counting her breaths. In, out, just get home. Then, a familiar black sedan, sleek and quiet, nosed its way through the emergency vehicles. It stopped right at the edge of the police tape. The driver's door opened, and a big man in a simple dark jacket got out. He had a calm, watchful energy about him, an ex-military bearing. This was the mayor's driver, a man who had worked for the family for years, who was more of a friend and protector than an employee. He took one look at her on the ground. The cold packed to her face, and his own expression went still and hard. He didn't run, but he moved with a swift, sure purpose. He ducked under the police tape, ignoring an officer who started to say, "Hey, you can't." The driver simply held up a hand, his attention entirely on the woman. He knelt beside her. "Let's go," he said softly, his voice all business. "Can you walk?" She nodded. With his help, she got to her feet, her legs wobbly. He supported her firmly, one arm around her shoulders, shielding her from the crowd with his own body. He guided her to the open back door of the sedan. He didn't speak to the police. He didn't look at the cameras. He had one job, extract her. But in a city on edge, cameras see everything. A dozen phones captured the moment. The injured woman in the hoodie, being helped into the back of a very official-looking, expensive car. The car's license plate, while not the standard mayoral one, was a low, special number that people who paid attention might recognize. The video clips were short, shaky, but clear. They flew from phone to phone, from social media feed to social media feed. Asterisk injured woman at protest. It's picked up in luxury car. Asterisk asterisk. Who is she? Asterisk asterisk special treatment already? Asterisk Finch, sitting in the back of the patrol car, watched his sergeant talking urgently on the phone. He felt a heavy, cold dread settling in his stomach. He pulled out his own personal phone, his hands shaking. He opened a local news feed. The top story was already about the protest turning violent. He clicked on it. There were photos of the crowd, of police information. And then he saw it. A photo of the sedan. A close-up of the license plate. He knew that plate. He'd seen it before, during the mayor's inauguration parade. It was the mayor's private car. The blood seemed to freeze in his veins. He zoomed in on the grainy image of the woman being helped into the back seat. The scarf, the jeans, the bag. It was her. The woman he had struck. A sound escaped him, a small, choked gasp. He fumbled with the door handle, stumbling out of the car. His partner turned. "Finch, get back in." "Sergeant." Finch's voice was too high, too tight. He held out his phone. "The car? That's the mayor's car. The woman, I think. I think that was the mayor's wife." The sergeant's face, already stern, seemed to turn to stone. He took the phone, looked at it, and closed his eyes for a single long second. When he opened them, he looked at Finch not as an officer who'd made a mistake, but as a man who had just detonated a bomb in the middle of the city. He didn't say a word. He just turned and started barking new orders into his radio, his voice tense. Across town, in his quiet city hall office, the mayor was reviewing his notes for the police union meeting. He was practicing his lines, trying to find the balance between firmness and collaboration. His own phone buzzed with a text from his driver. "Picking up your wife. Minor situation at the protest. She's okay. Headed home." He felt a spike of worry, but the message said she was okay. He texted back, "What happened? Is she hurt?" Before a reply came, his chief of staff threw the door open without knocking. Her face was pale. "Sir, you need to see this." She didn't wait for an answer. She turned on the small television mounted on his office wall, flipping to a local news channel. The screen showed the protest scene from a helicopter. Then it cut to the shaky phone video. The mayor watched, confused at first, as the camera zoomed in on a woman sitting on the curb. Then he saw the black sedan pull up. He saw his driver get out. His breath caught. He watched, his heart beginning to pound against his ribs, as his driver helped the woman stand. The camera caught her profile for just a second as she turned towards the car door. It was the curve of her cheek, the way she held her head, the familiar way she leaned on the driver for support, that it was his wife. The news anchor's voice was grave. Disturbing scenes from the environmental protest downtown. Police used force to clear a blockage, and one woman appears to have been seriously injured. In a puzzling development, the injured woman was quickly escorted from the scene, not by ambulance, but in this private luxury vehicle. We are working to confirm the identity of the woman and the owner of the car. The mayor stood perfectly still. The notes for his meeting were forgotten in his hands. All he could see was the way she had faltered as she stood up, the obvious pain in her posture. The screen switched to a still image, a close-up taken from the video. It was his wife's face, her eye already swelling shut, a dark, ugly mark spreading across her cheekbone. Her expression was one of dazed, profound hurt. In that moment, the careful political world he had been preparing for shattered. The union meeting, the policy review, the press statements, it all evaporated. This was no longer about the city. This was personal. This was his heart, lying hurt on the asphalt. His phone buzzed again. It was his driver. The text was simple. At the house. She needs you. Now. He looked at his chief of staff. Her eyes were wide with sympathy and horror. Cancel everything, he said, his voice surprisingly quiet, almost calm. It was the calm that comes before a storm. Get the police chief on the phone. I'm going home. He grabbed his coat and walked out, leaving the television on, the image of his wife's battered face glowing in the empty room. At the exact same moment, in living rooms and on phones across Crestwood, the official news alert flashed on screens. Breaking. Sources confirm the woman injured at the downtown protest is mayor's wife. Officer involved suspended. More details to come. The story was no longer about a protest or a police action. It had just become about a single blow and a city holding its breath to see what would happen next. The mayor's house was no longer a home. It felt like a command post under quiet siege. The driver had pulled into the garage and closed the door before helping her inside, a maneuver to avoid the single news van that had already screeched to a halt at the end of the driveway. Inside, the lights were too bright. The familiar rooms felt strange and too still. He found his wife in the downstairs bathroom, sitting on the edge of the bathtub. She was holding a fresh ice pack wrapped in a towel against her face. In the harsh bathroom light, the injury was worse than he could have imagined. A deep purple bruise was flowering from her temple down to her jaw, centered around a puffy, grotesque swelling on her cheekbone. The corner of her eye was an angry red. She looked small, folded in on herself. He knelt in front of her, the tiles hard against his knees. He didn't say a word. He just put his hands on her legs, a gentle touch. She opened her one good eye and looked at him. In that look, he saw the pain, the shock, but also a flicker of something else, a deep, cold anger he had never seen in her before. It's broken, she said, her voice muffled and strange. The medic thought so. It feels loose. She tried to swallow and winced. He hit me. He just swung. A hot, helpless rage boiled up in the mayor's throat. He wanted to break something. He wanted to find the officer right then and there. But he swallowed it down. This wasn't about his anger yet. It was about her. He helped her up, guided her to the living room sofa, got her water, more ice. His hands were trembling. His phone began to vibrate, skittering across the coffee table like a live thing. The screen lit up with the name of the police chief, then his chief of staff, then the city council president. He ignored them all. He sat beside his wife, holding her good hand. Why were you there? He asked softly, not as an accusation, but a need to understand. She told him, in halting sentences, about wanting to listen, about the neighborhood kids and their park, about feeling disconnected. I just wanted to hear their voices, she whispered, not the filtered ones that come to you in meetings. She looked at him, her eye glistening. And I heard them. And then I heard that crack. The phone rang again. This time it was the hospital administrator, a personal friend. You need to bring her in, the friend said, his voice urgent. We need to document this officially. For her health and for everything that comes next. That broke the spell. The everything that comes next had arrived. The mayor helped his wife to the car, and they slipped out a back service gate, avoiding the growing crowd of media now camped at his front door. At the hospital, they were taken through a private entrance. X-rays confirmed it. A fractured cheekbone. The doctor explained it in calm, clinical terms, a non-displaced fracture, but a serious one, painful. It would heal with time, but there might always be a slight change. A memory in the bone. While his wife was being treated, the mayor stepped into a quiet hallway. He could no longer avoid the world. He called the police chief back. The chief's voice was heavy with a mix of apology and dread. "Mr. Mayor, on behalf of the entire department, I am so profoundly sorry. There are no words. The officer, Derek Finch, has been immediately suspended. Internal Affairs has opened the highest priority investigation. We are fully cooperating." The mayor listened, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. What was the reason? He asked, his voice flat. What did the report say? There was a pause. The initial report from the officer states. It states the subject was non-compliant and moved aggressively. That contact was accidental during crowd dispersal. He hit my wife in the face with a baton, the mayor said, each word clipped and hard. There is nothing accidental about that. I know, sir. I know. We are reviewing all body camera footage. We will get to the truth. When they returned home, the street was full of satellite trucks. The story was the only story now. The mayor knew he had to speak. He helped his wife upstairs to their darkened bedroom. She needed to sleep, but he knew she was lying there, awake, listening. Downstairs in his study, he stood in front of a simple webcam. He didn't put on a suit jacket. He looked like a tired, worried man, which is exactly what he was. He turned on the camera for a live statement. His face was grave. He spoke slowly. This afternoon, my wife was severely injured at the protest downtown. She was there as a private citizen, listening to her neighbors. She was not threatening anyone. She was trying to ask for calm. He paused, the image of her broken face flashing in his mind. His voice thickened with emotion. He did not try to hide. She suffered a fractured cheekbone from a police baton. This is not a political issue to me. It is a personal agony. But it is also a symptom of the very sickness in our city that I was elected to cure. A sickness where fear and force replace communication and respect. He called for a full, transparent, and independent investigation. He did not mention Officer Finch by name. He didn't have to. Everyone already knew it. The reaction was instant and split the city in two. Community groups, activists, and many ordinary people praised his raw honesty. They saw his pain as proof of a system that was broken. But behind the blue line, the reaction was different. In the police precincts, the mayor's words landed like a declaration of war. The union president, a blunt, barrel-chested man, held his own press conference within the hour. He stood in front of a phalanx of officers in uniform. We all regret the mayor's wife was injured, the union president said, his voice firm. But policing is not a clean business. It happens in seconds. This officer is a dedicated public servant who is faced with a volatile, unlawful situation. To prejudge him, to call this a sickness before the facts are in, is irresponsible and dangerous. It disrespects every man and woman who puts on this badge and risks their life for this city. The message was clear. Asterisk one of us. You are attacking one of us. Asterisk that night. Officer Finch sat in his small, dark apartment. The TV was off. His phone was blowing up with texts, some from family, some from fellow officers offering vague support, some from numbers he didn't know, filled with hate. He felt completely alone. The union lawyer had told him not to talk to anyone, to say nothing. We'll defend you, the lawyer had said. It was a lawful order in a chaotic situation. You perceived a threat, but the image wouldn't leave him. The woman's eyes, just before the baton hit. She hadn't looked angry or threatening. She had looked concerned. And then the shock, the pain. And then the mayor's face on TV, the raw hurt in his voice. His father had called. Keep your head down, son. The union will handle it. They're trying to make an example of you because of who she is. Don't let them. But was that it? Was he just a pawn? He replayed it in his mind over and over. The order to clear the driveway. The surge of adrenaline. The feeling of being surrounded by yelling faces. Her voice, "Officer, please?" Had she been a threat? Or had he just been scared and angry and too ready to use the power in his hands? He got up and poured a glass of water, his hands shaking. He looked at his reflection in the dark window. He didn't see a hero or a villain. He saw a young man who was terrified of what he had done, and even more terrified of what was coming. The next morning, the district attorney, an elected official known for being tough, made an announcement. Due to the grave nature of the injury and the high-profile circumstances, her office was taking over the investigation from Internal Affairs. They were reviewing all evidence, including the body camera footage. Criminal charges, including felony assault, were on the table. When Finch heard that, the last bit of color drained from his face. This wasn't about his job anymore. This was about his freedom. The solid ground of his life had not just cracked. It had opened up beneath him, and he was falling. The Union's defense now felt like a thin rope, fraying fast. He was alone with the memory of that crack, and the eyes of an entire city waiting to see him punished. The city was holding its breath, waiting for the explosion. For 2 tense weeks, Crestwood felt like a pot a-boil over. Protests continued, now larger and more focused. Chants of justice for the mayor's wife mingled with support our police at opposing rallies separated by metal barricades and weary officers. The story was national news now, a perfect, painful symbol of a divided America. In the mayor's house, a different kind of tension had settled. The physical pain was slowly, grudgingly, becoming manageable for his wife. The swelling had gone down, leaving a spectacular yellow and purple bruise that dominated the side of her face. But the deeper hurt was harder to soothe. She was quiet, spending hours in her small home greenhouse, her fingers tracing the leaves of her plants, as if their quiet growth could teach her something about healing. Her husband was moving in the opposite direction. His personal pain had hardened into a cold, political resolve. He spent his days in meetings, his jaw set, drafting a sweeping set of police reforms he called Crestwood Accord. It called for new de-escalation rules, independent oversight, and changes to use-of-force policies. His advisors urged caution, compromise. The union was already calling it a surrender. But the mayor would just look at them, and in his eyes, they could all see the ghost of his wife's battered face. He was not in a mood to compromise. One evening, he laid out the draft legislation on the dining table, pages covered in bold red ink. "This is how we make sure it never happens again," he said, his voice firm. His wife looked up from her book, her good eye meeting his. "For who?" she asked quietly. "For everyone. For the next person who just wants to be heard." She put the book down. "And what happens to the officer?" "The DA is pushing for felony assault. He'll be prosecuted. He'll serve time. He'll be an example." He said it with finality. She was silent for a long moment. "An example of what? That if you hurt someone powerful, you pay? What about the others, the ones nobody films?" He frowned, walking over to her. "What are you saying? After what he did to you?" "I think about it every minute," she said, touching her tender cheekbone. "I feel his fear. It's stuck in my jaw. But a long trial. It will tear the city apart. It will just be us versus them, again and again. More anger. More sides." She took a slow breath. What if there was another way? What if he had to face what he did, not just to me, but to the idea of what he was supposed to be? He stared at her, not understanding. "I've been reading," she said, "about restorative justice. It's not about letting him off. It's about making the punishment fit the real crime. The crime isn't just against my face. It's against the community's trust. What if, before any sentencing, he had to sit in a room and hear it? Hear it from me, from you, from community leaders? Not through lawyers, but just human beings?" The mayor was speechless. It sounded naive, dangerous. The union would never allow it. The Day would think we're weak. "Maybe," she said, "but I'm the victim. Don't I get a say in what justice looks like?" Her gaze was steady. "I don't want to destroy him. I want him to understand the wreckage. And I want the city to see that understanding is harder than hate." Meanwhile, in a small, stark office, Officer Finch sat with his union lawyer and the lawyer appointed by the city. The DA's offer was on the table. Plead guilty to a felony assault charge. They would recommend a reduced sentence, maybe a year in prison, but he would be a felon. His life, as he knew it, would be over. "We can fight it," the union lawyer argued. "We say the situation was chaotic. You perceived a threat from her movement. The baton was a defensive tool that made accidental contact." Finch looked at the table. He had seen the enhanced body cam audio report that had leaked. You could hear her voice, clear as a bell, right before the strike. "Officer, please." There was no aggression in it, just a plea. The accidental contact argument was crumbling, and he knew it. "If we go to trial," the city lawyer said gently, "it will be a circus. The mayor will testify. His wife will testify. The whole city will be watching you, hating you. Even if you win, you lose." Finch felt sick. He thought of his parents, ashamed but standing by him. He thought of his former partner, who hadn't called once. He thought of the badge in a drawer at home, already taken from him. "What's the other option?" he asked, his voice hollow. The lawyers glanced at each other. The city lawyer cleared his throat. "There is an unusual proposal. From the mayor's wife, actually. A restorative justice conference. You would plead guilty to a misdemeanor. But before sentencing, you would agree to sit with her, with the mayor, with selected community members. You would listen to the impact of your actions. It would inform the judge's final sentence, which could include probation, community service, but likely no prison." The union lawyer scoffed. "It's a trap. A public shaming. They'll eat you alive in that room." But Finch wasn't listening to the lawyer anymore. He was thinking of the room, of having to look at her, at the damage he caused. The idea terrified him more than prison. Prison was a number, a sentence. That room was a mirror. "I'll do it," he whispered. "Finch, you're not thinking—" "I'll do it," he said, louder, looking up. His eyes were red-rimmed, but clear for the first time in weeks. "I hit her. I need to. I need to say that to her face." The meeting was arranged in a neutral, city-owned conference room. It was plain, with a large oval table. There were no flags, no pictures. Just chairs and a box of tissues in the center. Finch entered first with his lawyer. He wore a simple, ill-fitting suit. He couldn't sit. He stood by the chair, his hands clasped tightly. Then the door opened. The mayor entered, his posture rigid, his face an unreadable mask. Then his wife. Finch's breath caught. He had only seen the injury in grainy photos. In person, it was devastating. The bruise had faded to a sickly greenish yellow, but the memory of the violence was etched there. She moved carefully, holding herself with a quiet dignity that made him feel smaller than ever. They all sat. A trained facilitator, a calm older woman, explained the rules. This was not a debate. This was a dialogue. She would guide it. The mayor's wife spoke first. She didn't look at Finch immediately. She described the protest, her hope to listen. She described the sound the baton made, the feeling of the pavement, the taste of blood. She talked about the fear she saw in the young protesters' eyes, and how that fear had been mirrored in her own heart. "You took my sense of safety," she said, finally looking at him. "You made my city, my own home, feel like a dangerous place. Every time my husband leaves for work now, I wonder who is angry at him because of what you did to me." Finch flinched as if struck again. Then the mayor spoke, his voice low and thick. "You didn't just hit my wife. You struck at the heart of what I'm trying to do here. You gave every person who doubts me, who hates me, a weapon to use. You made my job, which is hard enough, almost impossible. You hurt the woman I love. I look at her face, and I want to hate you." Then it was Finch's turn. He had prepared nothing. His lawyer nudged him. He opened his mouth, but only a dry sound came out. He tried again. "I'm sorry," he began, the words feeble. He shook his head, tears suddenly spilling over. "I'm so sorry. It's not enough. It's nothing." He took a ragged breath. "I was scared. The yelling. The mayor's new rules. It felt like everyone was against us. And then you were there, and you were telling me to stop. And in my head, in that second, you were just another person trying to take my control away." He wiped his face roughly. "I wanted to be in control. I wanted to be the one who solved the problem. And I created a much, much worse one. I see you. I see what I did. And I don't know how to live with it." He wasn't talking to the lawyers or the facilitator. He was talking directly to her. "You weren't a threat. I was the threat. I understand that now?" The room was silent except for his quiet crying. The mayor looked down at his hands. His wife studied Finch's broken expression, the raw shame in his posture. She saw not a monster, but a young man who had been taught the wrong lessons and had just learned the hardest one of all. Far too late, the facilitator spoke softly about next steps, about the judge, about accountability. But the real work had happened in that quiet, terrible, honest room. No one had won. But for the first time, everyone had seen each other not as symbols, but as shattered people dot as they left. Finch paused at the door. He didn't turn around, but he said, so quietly, it was almost missed, "Thank you for letting me see." The mayor and his wife drove home in silence. After a while, she reached over and took his hand. He held it tightly, staring out at the city lights. "It wasn't what I expected," he finally said. "Me either," she replied. "But it felt human." The path forward was still uncertain, filled with legal steps and political fights. But the foundation of pure, simple vengeance had been replaced by something more fragile and more complicated, a painful, messy understanding. The healing, for all of them, could finally begin. The sentencing hearing was a quiet affair, almost an afterthought. After the raw, emotional earthquake of the Restorative Justice Conference, the formal courtroom felt like a stage play where everyone already knew the ending. Officer Derek Finch stood before the judge in the same ill-fitting suit. He had pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault, as agreed. The district attorney outlined the facts, her voice professional and detached. The defense lawyer spoke of remorse, of a life already appended. The judge, a weary-looking woman with sharp eyes, listened to it all. Then she asked if the victims wished to speak. The mayor's wife stood. She didn't walk to the podium. She just stood beside her seat. The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the lights. Her face was healing, but the faint shadow of the bruise was still visible. A ghost of that day on her cheekbone. "We have said what we needed to say to Mr. Finch," she said, her voice clear and calm in the hushed room. "This process is not about more punishment for us. It is about what happens next, for him and for our city. We ask that your sentence reflect the possibility of repair, not just the fact of the injury." The judge nodded slowly. She then sentenced Finch to 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and the permanent revocation of his police certification. He would not see the inside of a jail cell, but he would carry the conviction forever. The gavel fell with a soft, final crack. For Finch, it was the closing of one door and the opening of another into a blank, uncertain hallway. He walked out of the courthouse a former cop, a convicted criminal. The cameras flashed, but the frenzy was gone. The story had moved on. His community service was not picking up trash by the highway. It was assigned to a youth outreach program in the very neighborhoods where trust in the police was lowest. At first, the program director, a tough, kind woman who had seen everything, was skeptical. "They're going to eat you alive if they find out who you are," she told him bluntly. "They should know," Finch replied. He had no fight left in him. "I'll tell them." And he did? At a community center, standing in front of a group of bored, suspicious teenagers, he introduced himself not as Officer Finch, but as Derek. He told them he used to be a cop. He told them he made a terrible mistake because he was scared and angry and too proud to listen. He told them he hurt someone, and because of that, he lost the job he thought defined him. He was just a guy with a record now, trying to figure out how to be useful. The room was silent at first. Then a tall kid in the back snorted. "So what? You got caught." "That don't change nothing for us." Finch didn't argue. He just nodded. "You're right. It doesn't, but I'm here. So what should we do?" "You tell me." Slowly, awkwardly, it began. He helped them build a vegetable garden behind the center. He didn't give orders. He asked questions. He drove the van for field trips. He listened to their frustrations about cops, about school, about life. He didn't defend the badge anymore. He couldn't. But sometimes, very carefully, he would explain why someone in a uniform might feel scared too. It wasn't an excuse, he said. It was just a fact. And fear makes people do stupid, terrible things. They started to hear him, not as a cop, but as a cautionary tale. Back at City Hall, the mayor was fighting his own battles. The Crestwood Accord was not popular. Police union ads called it a betrayal. Some council members wavered. But the mayor had a new steel in his resolve, tempered by the private conference room meeting. He wasn't just fighting for policy now. He was fighting for the fragile idea that something good could grow from something awful. He stood in the council chambers for the final vote, his wife watching from the gallery. Her presence was a quiet reminder to everyone of why they were there. When the votes were counted, the reforms passed by the slimmest of margins. They included mandatory de-escalation training, a powerful independent civilian review board, and a community liaison program that would put officers into neighborhoods to talk, not just patrol dot. It wasn't a magic fix. Cynics on both sides dismissed it. But it was a start. The system had been bent, not broken, and new rules were now in place. One afternoon, about a year after the protest, the mayor's wife was visiting a new community garden project. It was part of her foundation's work, bringing people together to grow food and conversation. She was kneeling in the dirt, helping a young boy plant tomato seedlings, her hands coated in dark soil. A man approached, holding a flat of marigolds. It was Finch. He was thinner, his face older. He stopped a few feet away, waiting. She saw him and stood up, wiping her hands on her jeans. The faint scar on her cheekbone caught the sunlight. They looked at each other for a moment. There was no crowd, no cameras, no facilitators. Just two people in a garden. "They said you'd be here," he said finally, his voice rough. "The community service coordinator. I finished my hours last week." These, he gestured with the flowers, are for the garden. Marigolds. They keep pests away. She looked at the vibrant orange and yellow blooms. Thank you, she said. It wasn't a forgiveness. It was an acknowledgement. I'm working construction now, he offered, as if he needed to explain himself. It's honest work. She nodded. How are the kids at the center? A flicker of something, not a smile, but its distant cousin touched his mouth. They're okay. Hard-headed. They keep me straight. There was another silence, but it wasn't heavy. It was the silence of two people who had shared a terrible thing and survived it. The new police academy, she said. They've asked me to come speak. About that day. About the perspective from the other side. Finch looked at the ground, then back at her. They should hear it. He paused. Would you want me to come with you? Not to speak. Just to be there. So they can see? Both sides of it. She studied him, this young man who had shattered her face, and then, piece by piece, had tried to understand the wreckage he'd caused. It was a bold ask. A painful one. But it felt right for the story they were now both a part of. Yes, she said. I think they should see. He gave a single, firm nod, a ghost of his old cop's bearing. He set the marigolds down on a nearby bench. I'll be there, he said. Then he turned and walked away, back to his new, quieter life. She watched him go, then knelt back down in the dirt with the boy. Okay, she said, her voice soft. Let's get these tomatoes in the ground. They need a strong foundation. That evening, the mayor came home tired. He found his wife on their back patio, looking out at their own small garden. He put a hand on her shoulder. Long day? She asked. The usual, he sighed. But the liaison program starts next month. Some good officers signed up. Real believers. She leaned her head against his hand. I saw him today. Finch. He brought flowers for the community garden. The mayor went very still. The old protective anger stirred, but it was fainter now, tempered by time and by the change he saw in his city and in his wife. And we talked. He's going to come with me to speak at the police academy. He let out a long breath, then finally nodded. It was not the justice he had once craved in his fury. It was something slower and more lasting. The city wasn't fixed. Trust was still a fragile seedling. But it was in the ground now, being tended to. They stood there together in the gathering dusk, two people who had been broken and were learning, slowly, how to heal.